Does she love us? I don't want one.
Okay, good evening, everybody. It's March 18th, 2024, and this is a regular meeting of the Moscow City Council. Bryce.
Sure. If you're able, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Wait for Drew to get all set. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you all. First up is the consent agenda, and this consists of items that are either routine or non-controversial and have been previously considered by Public Works and Finance Committee or the Administrative Committee. Any item can be removed for separate consideration by a member of the council.
Your Honor, I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Okay, Drew,
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Julia,
Aye.
Bryce.
Aye.
Okay, consent agenda goes. Next up, anything on staff recognition tonight? Okay, mayor's appointments, there are no one on that. Public comment and mayor's response period. And for the next 15 minutes in 3-minute increments, we invite members of the public to come up to the podium, state your name and address, and tell us what's on your mind about things, as long as it's not on tonight's agenda, nor pending before Planning and Zoning or the Board of Adjustment. Any takers for public comment tonight? No, we are scooting. Okay. Next up, we have a public hearing, which is a proposed rezone of a 4.98 acre property located at 1326 Orchard Avenue. The way the public hearing works is I open the public hearing. The staff in the incarnation of Mike Ray presents. City Council asks questions there. Then we have time for the applicant to come up and provide information about the project if they should choose to do so. Following that, we have testimony in favor, testimony in opposition, and testimony of a general nature in that order following. After that, the applicant has a chance to respond to any comments that were made during the public comment period. And then the public hearing closes and council deliberates and achieves a conclusion. So at this time, we're open. Mike, you're on.
Thank you, Your Honor, Council. So before you tonight, we have a public hearing. This is a proposed rezone of about approximately 5-acre property at 1326 Orchard Avenue. The applicant's Justin Goodwin, and he's proposing this rezone from the current designation of Farm Ranch to R1, which is our low-density, single-family residential zoning district. So kind of a long linear parcel outlined in red to the center of your screen. Just to orient yourself, we've got Orchard Avenue running north-south here, Lanny Drive running east-west, Slonaker over here to the east as well. This is currently Woodbury subdivision. It's currently under construction. The aerial photo is a couple years old. And then, of course, Highland Drive subdivision here to the west. So just a closer view of the property. You can see Lanny Drive to the south. There is a street, Peekaboo Street, located in the middle of the property. Currently a single-family dwelling and an outbuilding to the western portion of the property. Some topography of the area. So each one of these lines represents 1 feet of elevation change until it slopes down into Peekaboo Street. And then there is a ridge here to the eastern portion of the property. Brings us to the current comprehensive plan land use designation. It's auto urban residential, as well as pretty much the entire surrounding area, with the exception of a pocket of suburban residential to the northwest. And of course, our park, which is parks and open space to the south there. So what the comp plan says about auto urban residential, contains predominantly single-family detached homes on lots ranging from 7,000 to 11,000 square feet in size, more isolated from surrounding uses, which may require residents to rely more on automobile transportation. It's typically low to moderate density residential uses, 3 to 6 units per acre, which could include a mixture of detached single-family twin home and townhouse dwellings. And then it points to the R1, R2, or R3 zones as being the most appropriate. That brings us to the current zoning configuration of the area. Like I mentioned before, it's farm ranch. That's the green shade. The proposal is R1, so that'd be consistent with the Peekaboo Estates subdivision to the south, as well as Blackwood subdivision, which includes Sloniker there to the east. So the R1 zone, low-density residential zone, appropriate where the following circumstances are present. Single-family dwellings predominate the area, and the physical character of the area does not lend it to more intense development, either by virtue of irregular topography, restricted access, division of land into subdivision lots of a size greater than the minimum lot size required by the zoning district, or the application of the comprehensive plan policies to the land in question. So really just a single family zone, but it also includes some urban agriculture, so market community gardens, group childcare facilities, and public parks and rec facilities as well. Orchard Avenue in this segment is designated as a collector street. It's just 20 feet in width for the paved roadway with gravel shoulders. Peekaboo Street is fully developed. It's a local street, 36-foot wide roadway with curb gutter, tree lawn, sidewalks on both sides of the street. And there are existing water and sewer mains in the surrounding streets, which are sufficient capacity to accommodate any future use the R1 zone would allow. Planning and Zoning Commission did conduct a public hearing for this rezone that occurred on February 28th of this year, and they recommended approval with no conditions. Staff's recommendation for the council is to conduct a public hearing and upon consideration of any testimony received, approve the proposed zoning ordinance under suspension of the rules, requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and then to be read by title and published by summary, and then adopt Planning and Zoning Commission's RCS document. We'll certainly be able to try to answer any questions you have.
I feel like I've been out of the loop for a little bit. Did anyone come to that public hearing? Did you get any feedback on that?
Really just the applicant. There were, a handful of people from the public in the neighborhood that didn't testify.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mike. Can you look at the overhead, the map again? Yep.
This word?
So if that's developed into housing, where is the access? Like, does it all collect on Peekaboo or on Orchard or?
The subject property. If this is developed?
Yeah.
Their access on Orchard as well as Peekaboo Street there.
So they would be long driveways or a private street or something like that?
There could be a smaller PUD with a private street that accommodates a series of lots. The challenge here is just street frontage. So every lot that's created typically has to have a certain amount of street frontage on a public street. And so that would be, just a little bit challenging, but this is just for the rezone portion. There's no other proposal.
I couldn't figure, okay, that's why I couldn't figure it out
Yeah.
because there's no.
Yeah, that was
There's
my
not
question.
not a plan yet.
That was my question too.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Don't run off as always. So at this time, public testimony, this is public testimony on the part of the applicant. So would the applicant like to come up and tell us what's on your mind?
Hi, City Council. I'm Justin Goodwin. I am the applicant, not the landowner, in process of helping to purchase the property. So Juliet, I'll be able to answer a little bit of your question kind of with the purpose of it is there's 6 neighbors. Our plan is to buy about the 4 acres, offset the house and divvy that up amongst us to maintain access for no development behind each of our houses. So that's the intended plan. We had to get it rezoned to be able to facilitate that. And so the whole nature of this process is to avoid a PUD being put back there, to avoid having anybody try to build right behind our houses. So we know that Kay, the current owner, and her husband, prior to passing, that was kind of their desire, was when they were ready to move on, was to try to have that remain undeveloped. And we're hoping to be able to see that through. Any questions for me that I could answer?
Can I just make
Sure.
sure I understand? So you are buying the property behind those 6 houses so that it's not developed?
Yep. So there's 6 of the neighbors in there, so not all of us are included, but there'll be 6 of us. And then pending this approval and going through the process, there will be lot line adjustments that will be coming down your way to hopefully approve. That will show the those lots being extended. So we'll be absorbing them into our current Lanny lots. So to be able to facilitate, like I said, avoiding any development going forward on it.
Thanks for explaining that.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you.
Okay. Now we get on to public testimony in favor of the application. So just a reminder, just your name, address, and then go for it.
All right, members of the council, Mr. Mayor, I'm Sean Wilson. I live at 2780 North Mountain View Road. I represent the applicant not the applicant, but the actual landowner, Kay Moran, in terms of her selling this property. The original plan for Mrs. Moran was to have this go to the neighbors if at all possible. I'm going to read you an email that she sent to me that I know the neighbors have heard, that she wrote to them when they first got together. She said, 100 years ago in June 1924, David and Ida Morgan purchased acreage on a country road now known as Orchard Avenue and settled in with their young family. The rural setting and fertile ground provided a perfect place to raise cows, pigs, and chickens and grow apples, plums, pears, as well as garden vegetables, turnips, beets, and potatoes. During the war years, while David was away, Ida kept careful records for the neighbors as they traded goods, a piglet for a bushel of apples or loaves of bread for a basket of vegetables. Her orchard and gardens were known as Morgan's Orchard. Her legacy is honored through the naming of the neighborhood park, Morgan's Orchard Park. Today, the Morgan and Moran families are thankful for their neighbors, and they hope that they continue to enjoy the peace and serenity this land provides. Best wishes to all. That frames the discussion, and I would just pose to you, when have you ever seen a group of neighbors come together to make application for a rezone adjacent to their own properties? Thank you.
Good point. Further testimony in favor? Any testimony in opposition? Testimony of a general nature? Okay, I think we skipped the part. I don't think you need to rebut your own testimony.
Good.
So we'll pass on that. At this point, close the public hearing. Council, please go forth and deliberate.
I don't know if you guys watch Seth Meyers, but he has a part on his late night TV show that is the kind of story we need right now. And this is it. This is such a cool legacy for the Morgan family and now for yours. And I just think it's kind of gives me goosebumps and I get a little emotional. So I'm going to be hugely in favor of this. Hugely.
This is a cool story. Yeah, 100%. That's great.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the proposed zoning ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
Bryce can have it.
I think I wasn't quite finished.
Oh,
That was just a good pause.
sorry, we were so
That was a good
excited about
pause,
it,
yeah.
we could barely stand
Take a
it.
breath.
Yeah.
I gotta
No,
breathe.
there's no breathing in council.
And adopt the plan. Can I just keep going?
You should.
Right.
Just keep reading.
And adopt the Planning and Zoning Commission reason statement of relative criteria.
Second.
There we go. Any discussion? Okay. Drew,
I have a conflict of interest and need to recluse myself from the vote.
okay. Gina,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Bryce,
Aye.
Julia.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. So now we have ordinance number 2024. Okay,
I thought you were correcting him. I'm like, no, it's 2024. I'm pretty sure. It's
okay. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, providing for the rezoning of an approximately 4.98 acre property described in Section 2 from Farm Ranch FR to Low Density Single Family Residential R1, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from and after its passage, approval, and publication according to law. So there we have it. Congratulations.
Thank you for the high point of the meeting.
Wait a minute, we're coming up to the high point of the meeting.
No, we've seen Nick
Pretty much.
before.
Okay, item 6, the comprehensive annual financial report presentation. Renee Tack leading along with Nick Nickerson.
It's also exciting. but not-
It's math.
Generally
though.
not goosebumpy.
It's math.
Renee,
Hello, everyone.
hello.
If you don't, for those who don't know me, I'm Renee Tack. I'm the Assistant Finance Director. And we're here today to talk about the audited financial statements. And in a minute, Nick Nicholson from Presnell Gage will give us some results. But I thought I'd just give us a little bit of history, a little bit of context. So this is about a 6-month process. It starts in September with the planning for year end and the audit. The end of September is our fiscal year. We work on fixed assets, on debt service, on grants, on various things to get everything all scrubbed and make sure everything's correct. We send information, all that information, binders of information to the auditors by the middle of November. And then the auditors come for an on-site visit the first part of December. And then after that, we start working on drafts of the reports, cleaning up whatever issues and looking at more documentation if they need to. And then we work out what the report should look like. We start working on the management discussion and analysis, the transmittal letter, and the statistics. Those are all done by the finance department with lots of help from, and thank you to everyone who's helped put some of that information together, because it's not information that we could naturally get on our own. And then Nick and his people put the draft report together. We met with the audit committee on March 5th, and they had some final corrections or suggestions to make to the audit report. And then Presnell Gage completed the report that you have seen in your packet today. So with that, I'll let Nick take over.
Hello, Nick. It seems you were just here. Time flies when you're having fun.
I know it. A year goes by pretty quick. It does. All right. Okay. Well, I'm Nick Nicholson. That we actually do have a couple new faces on the board. So I work for Presnell Gage Accounting. We've actually been doing the City of Moscow audit actually as long as I have been at Presnell Gage, which is going on 20 years now. So we've had a great relationship with the city and hope to continue to do so. I guess before we kind of get started, I'll just, Renee kind of touched on the process of the audit from an outside perspective. And then I also always like to give kind of a background from an auditor perspective of what we're looking for and how we go about the process of the audit. We take part in what's called a risk-based audit. Under standards, we're required to basically look at risk and how do we lower risk in terms of financial information to a level that is acceptable to issue a report, basically an opinion. And so in essence, during our planning, we get all the information from staff and we go through it and we look and say, all right, what areas are the highest level of risk that face the city's finances? Where could an issue occur? And then we look at those areas and we determine, all right, how are we going to test those areas primarily? That's our biggest area of testing. And then we devise procedures basically to test those areas, involving, I guess, statistical sampling and all of these different things. But ultimately, to come to an opinion that we feel comfortable saying, all right, beyond in a material respects, is this the actual position of the city and the activities that took place? Is it really what happened? And ultimately, that's the process. That's how we go about that. So with that being said, I'll kind of just go into some highlights. And let's hope we can. Perfect. So the report itself is actually called the Published Annual Comprehensive Financial Report annually. It's governed by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board and is in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. Now, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report is actually, it's more extensive than your usual audit report. And you guys have undertaken this, I think, 20 years now, and this will be the 21st once submitted. And the purpose of that is it provides a huge amount of information. She was talking about statistical sections and all of these other items that basically give a background of what's going on in the city. Now, this is poured over by a reviewer within the government, and they basically go through and they question and will give issue. If they come up with an issue, they can fail the report. But ultimately, if you pass this, it does help in the financing world. You can actually qualify for lower rates. And so in your guys' history, it has made a great effect on your ability to get good bond coverage at reasonable rates, and probably has saved the city a fair amount of money. Now, how much that can't really quantify, but a lot, I would say over a 20-year window. So that's the purpose of kind of the extensive report that you see. I think it's 100 and close to almost 200 pages. So most of those reports would probably be less than half of that. So kind of as I talked about, as we go through this, there's responsibility that's placed on the city and management, and our responsibilities as an auditor going through this. So your guys's, or I guess your management's responsibility in the audit is the documentation, everything that goes into it. You are, I guess, responsible for internal controls and the processes that you put in place and how you hold to those processes. And ultimately, the presentation and the preparation of the financial statements is also your responsibility. Now, we assist with that, obviously, but ultimately, at the end of the day, you guys have to be able to put your rubber stamp on it, and management has to say, yes, this is exactly what is taking place. Our responsibility is strictly to express an opinion. There's multiple opinions within this, but ultimately, that's what the auditor is hired for, is to look at this information, to test it, and then ultimately give our stamp of approval, or in some cases, our stamp of unapproval, or here are some items that are missing. So there's actually three opinions in this financial statement. There's one, the first one is the representation of the city's finances. The second is in governmental accounting standards. It's actually an opinion on your internal controls over the financial information and on compliance. And then there's one called the Single Audit Act. And this comes into play when you have expended more than $750,000 of federal awards. Basically, we have to do additional testing if you have spent above that threshold on your federal programs and your major federal programs, and then basically put another opinion that says, hey, your internal controls and the processing of it are also following and are in compliance with those standards. For this year, we have come for all three of those. We have what are called unmodified opinions. Now, that's legalese for a clean opinion. In our terminology, we call it a clean opinion. Unmodified means that we did not come up with anything that would modify, that would make us modify our report from saying it's appropriate. So. Kind of some financial highlights. Actually, it's a little bit small. I'll look at mine. So at the end of the fiscal year 2023, the city government's government-wide net position, that's basically equity, increased by about $16 million to $177 million. This increase, primary increase, is due to some very large projects. You guys had a lot of street projects and some big water projects that ultimately you put new infrastructure in, and that's ultimately where the increase in net position, the majority of it came. In the governmental, now there's you've got several sets, and we'll go into the details, but governmental funds, this is non-water, sewer, garbage, stormwater. This would be your general government and parks and all of those type of things. Restricted fund balance of about 1.9 million. That basically, there's about 22 million of fund balance in the governmental. About 2 million, just under 2 million of it is restricted. Basically, those restrictions are for debt service, basically future debt payments. 499,000 for highway user fees. Basically, they earmark, we're giving you this money, but you have to spend it for this exact purpose. And then 789,000 is restricted for future culture and recreation activity by the Hamilton estate. So business type activities, net position of about 27 million. is restricted. Most of that is basically for future capital projects. Basically, that's out there and then a little bit for 400,000 for debt service. You can kind of see, I'm not going to go into each one, but kind of these are the expenses from the government-wide operations from year to year. You can see it kind of a steady increase outside of 2021 when the world was a little bit odd, and 2020 and 2021 kind of had some weird fluctuations, but ultimately, like anything, continues to rise in expenditures. I'm going to go quickly through this. Basically, the audited financial statements have many different categories of funds. Ultimately, we highlight in most of the financial statements what are called your major funds, basically your bigger funds. If they are 10% of the total fund balance or an asset or a liability, it's considered to be a major fund. So if you add up all of them, you take 10% of your assets. If that fund has 10%, bigger than that number, it's a major fund. Basically by size, it's determined. So your major funds, general fund, street fund, recreation, culture, actually culture and recreation. I got it right. We flipped them. I was making sure we got it. Recreation and culture, capital projects, and then the Hamilton Fund. And then you can see some of the non-major, and then the enterprise funds as well. Those are your business style funds. The general fund, it basically accounts for all resources except those required to be accounted for in another fund. And it's basically your chief operating fund of the city. Special revenue funds account for proceeds of a specific revenue. Basically, you receive revenue that has a specific purpose or that is required to be spent in a certain manner, falls under a special revenue fund. And those would be some of your main special revenue funds. Here is kind of your governmental operating fund. This is basically your fund balance for general fund, streets, cultures, and rec over the last 5 years. You can see really the increase in the fund balance of the general fund has continued to rise. Now, what is the purpose, I guess, of the fund balance? Generally, at the end of the year, your fund balance really is just what you have to operate going forward. It really gives a good picture of, all right, how healthy are we? How are we going into the next year? What's our ability to continue operations? So how much is a good amount? In reality, we usually put this in terms of how many days of expenditures or months of expenditures you have. Basically, the general funds carry over at the end of the year had about 9.1 months of operations, meaning if you spent money in the general fund at the exact same rate you did this year, next year, you could operate without any incoming funds for 9.1 months before you ran out and you had no ability to continue operations. So what is healthy? We generally say if you're at 2 months, that's as low as we would ever allow you to go. We would say if you're under 2 months, you're at risk, because in reality, general fund operations, grants, those type of things don't come in on a monthly basis. Your property taxes come in twice a year. So your ability to continue operations is not going to be plentiful every single day. You're not going to have the same amount of money coming in. And so we generally say a minimum of 60 days, but we usually say also 6 months is healthy. We would suggest, all right, get it to 6 months and we consider you healthy. So you're at 9 months. That means you're beyond healthy. You're there. But also, we would also say, is 9 months too much? We would not say 9 months is too much. In reality, 9 months is still healthy. If you were at 2 years or something like that, I would say, all right, maybe we're getting to where this is a little bit too high. And I would imagine patrons would start to question, all right, how much is needed to run the government if we're continuing to raise this. But at 9 months, good job. You're healthy. Your ability to continue to react to unforeseen circumstances. Hopefully a 2020 doesn't happen again. And but in that case, you would still be able to continue to operate. So general government. So throughout the financial statements in the expenditures, you'll actually see a breakout of how expenditures are summarized. One of these is general government. So if you see an expenditure in a general government, this is basically what is all encompassed in that. Public safety would, in the general fund, would be your second largest expenditure. And obviously that's primarily the police and fire and those type of things. Here's kind of a trend of your government revenue and expenditures. The dark section is your general government and your public safety expenditures, with the revenue basically being how you're funding those. Over time, you can see kind of that trend. This year, you were able to put, we talked about your fund balance increasing. That's basically where it's at. Your funding came in slightly above the cost of those two items. The next section would be, next major fund would be your cultures and recreation. Obviously, these are the different things that you're funding with cultures and recreation. And here's also kind of a trend of a breakdown of how that's being spent. Basic cultures and recreation, obviously the major part of it. There's a little bit of, the specialized, the 1912 Center, the play fields, and some of the Hamilton funds. As it's dwindled down, obviously that's decreased over time. Street fund, you can see kind of trends here. Street fund, obviously 2020, 2021 had some major dip in the amount of expenses. Basically, a lot of projects were put on hold at that point in time, just because of the nature of the environment. So see expenditures kind of have regained to that steady climb. Now, you also see the revenue line item is there in the middle. Basically, that means you can see that it has never quite met up with the level of expenditures, which means the general fund has also had to kick in some transfers in order to help support the continued operations of the street fund. All right, the last set of funds are your enterprise funds. Basically, these are user fee charge funds, goods and services. In essence, they have and down at the bottom says a different accounting treatment. Basically, they are operating and are represented in more of a business-like a set of financial accounting treatment. In essence, the governmental accounting standards require them to be treated as a business. They don't operate on more of a budgetary style basis. You capitalize your infrastructure, you depreciate it over its life, you put debt on the balance sheet, and you bring it down as you pay down your debt. Basically, the reason for that treatment comes into play a lot of times when it comes to financing. Banks will look at it, and the reason for that is they can compare you to the business world. They can look at those set of financial statements, say, all right, we're going out for a bond. We want to be able to say, are they debt worthy in relation to, say another entity, a business entity that's going out for a loan. Who do we give our money to? Are they, a safe bet for our money? And that's ultimately why that's governed that way. Here's some trends for each of them. The water fund, you can see, obviously in 2021, it went the opposite way. You actually had an increase in capital expense in the water fund. Generally, that's, you don't have as much control over those. You've got to renovate your water lines and stuff when it needs to happen. And then you can see it's kind of regaining here in the last year. It dipped last year. Net position of the water fund, basically over in 2020, you started setting money aside for future capital projects. Those projects have been being completed. You've completed some very large ones in 2023. So now your restriction for future water has gone down, and basically it's been transferred into your general infrastructure. Sewer fund, pretty steady. No major outliers here. A little bit of fluctuation in the capital projects, but it has been fairly standard for the last 5 years. Same be said there. Stormwater, brand new, last year. So it's very much in its infancy stage. So you can see how it's being funded there. And same thing, you guys have started a little bit of buildup of the capital projects for future. So sanitation, obviously this is more, you guys are paying for a service here, so that stays a lot steadier. There's not near as much capital expense there because you're not carrying a lot of infrastructure. So there you go. That kind of a similar trend there. Any questions for me on that?
No questions.
Well, I had a question about
Yeah,
testing.
I did hear.
Yes.
And then
Fire
you
away.
said statistics, and then you said more math, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow. But so if I can explain it, and then you can tell me if I'm
Yep,
wrong. How
fire
about
away.
that? So you look at the way a fund is performing with the governing rules, right? And your tests are whether or not that would last 6 months from now, or if 30,000 more people moved in, or
No,
help me.
no.
put that
So
in.
it would actually be more along the lines of testing the process. So if we look at the city as a whole and we look at, all right, this is how they are processing information.
Yeah.
This person reviews this, and then it's passed to this person on down the line
Oh,
until approval.
Okay.
And we basically look first to say, all right, is this process a reasonable process? If it is a reasonable process, then we select a sample of expenditures or whatever the process may be. And we say, all right, is it operating according to those parameters? If it's operating according to those parameters, then we are comfortable that the process is operating well. All the things are going through the process. I mean, we obviously, we select a sample, so we're not looking at one specific transaction. And if we ultimately find that there's no deviations in that testing, we come back and say, all right, we're comfortable that one, it's designed properly, two, that it's operating properly. And then that's what we base our opinion on.
So those two were on the hot seat, is what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Good job, girls. Okay.
Made sense to me.
Okay. So
I move we accept the City of Moscow audited annual comprehensive financial report for 2023 as presented by the lovely Nick.
Second.
that's a lovely day.
Just is that in the record?
It is now.
It is.
Okay. Julia,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Bryce,
Aye.
Drew.
Aye.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you
Nick.
very much.
Well
And
done.
as always, we appreciate working with the city. It's fantastic. Sarah and Renee, they do a great job of getting
do.
us information, and all the staff that we grill for multiple days, and Renee for much longer. And so we really appreciate working with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
See you in a month. I mean, a year.
Yeah.
In the meantime, council, keep all this in mind. We got budget coming up here, so remember everything that was said. It'll be useful. Next up is the FY 2025 Budget Priority Review from Bill Belknap.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. So this budget year is going to be maybe a little bit unique from the other prior fiscal years. So I wanted to kind of have an opportunity to touch base on how staff is viewing the budget. We'll be looking this upcoming fiscal year, what really our priorities are in trying to fund, and just make sure everybody's on the same page before we begin the budget process, and give a little bit of a preview of what's to come. So for that background, we have, the 23 audit was great, but since that time, since FY23, we've had some financial challenges that were presented to the city as a result of the Bradbury case down against the city of Lewiston. So the council is relatively aware of this. It involved transfers from the utility enterprise funds to the street fund for their impact upon the roadways that was deemed to be illegal. We were doing similar transfers, which we immediately ceased, and along with some other modifications to our internal financial practices. Additionally, the state sales tax revenues have declined or have been below the projected numbers for FY23. We ended up about $250,000 below what we had budgeted. And the future revenue forecast is a little bit murky right now. I think Idaho is going to remain relatively strong, but whether we'll see any continued decline or we just see those revenues plateau, it's a little bit early for us to see. We are still waiting for those forecasts to be coming from the state as we develop the budget this fiscal year. As a result of some of these challenges, we did suspend pay increases. We eliminated 6 positions that were unfilled, and all departments were required to reduce their commodity expenditures. And those are professional development, travel, training, office supplies, department supplies, kind of anything that's not personnel related within the department, professional services. So we're all required to reduce those expenditures by 20%. And that will become the baseline for the development of our FY25 fiscal year budget moving forward. We do have some accumulated one-time capital funds. So when you see like the general fund accumulated 1.9 million because of under expenditures last fiscal year, those are going to be one-time monies because that's approximately what we'll be losing in transfers to the general fund moving forward. So while we do have one-time monies, to address some important capital needs for the city, it's important that we keep in mind that we need to balance ongoing expenses with ongoing revenues and not just one-time accumulations. So that is something that we have always been very careful about here at the city, and just always want to reinforce that we don't want to start down that road of supporting ongoing expenses with one-time monies and then trying to fill the gap at some point. That is the House of Cards definition at some point in time. So obviously the budget is driven by our strategic priorities. These were updated here just over a year ago. I think we had 12 identified, but certainly number one, continuing to work towards the development of a sustainable water resource is the top priority, highest priority, and that's going to be a long-term project. So we're going to see that on the top of the list, I think, for many years to come, but I do believe we're going to be making some concrete steps in that direction. The stabilization of emergency medical and fire services was number 2. Updating the city's emergency communication system that was reaching end of life and had locations within the city where our emergency responders cannot have radio communications was number 3. Addressing our city shop needs at our antiquated facility was number 4. Employee recruitment and retention was number 5. Roadway maintenance funding, which is going to be, I think, also a ongoing long-term. It always has been a challenge for us, and every community struggles with road maintenance. Utilities, you have a revenue stream. You can accumulate funds for those capital improvements, but roadways have limited funding sources. So that's always going to be a bit of a challenge for us. Downtown infrastructure investment, you recall the downtown streetscape project, urban forest management, housing affordability, community mobility improvements, community beautification, playfield development, and then supporting local economic development rounded out the list from our last time that we were prioritizing these. So that'll give a little bit of update on what you might see in the upcoming budget. So with respect to the sustainable water resource development, as the council is aware, the Idaho Water Resource Board has allocated a little over $180,000 for continued study. And for us, we're wanting to do some preliminary engineering design to advance a preferred alternative for a surface water supply. So you will see that funding coming in the 25 budget, and you will see expenditures associated with that. But that, again, is being funded by that one-time monies from the state. But that'll help us move to a 5 or 10% level design to get a proof of concept of what is going to be that supply, what is the estimated cost for that project. For emergency medical and fire service stabilization, as the council is aware, we recently reached an agreement with the Musco Volunteer Fire Department to partner in funding 3 paramedic firefighter positions to ensure continuous paramedic coverage to maintain our ALS service. We are currently preparing the agreement between the city and the volunteers, so you'll see that here shortly. And our staff is also working on a SAFER grant application that can fund those positions for the first 3 years if we are successful. So the council, you will see the funding and appropriations for these positions within the FY25 budget. But again, those will be funded by outsourced sources, whether that's from the volunteer organization themselves, or if we're successful in the grant, it'll come in the form of grant. But we'll have revenue coming in that will offset those new positions, but those will be new expenditures. We won't have any direct financial new obligations outside of that funding until FY28, where we start paying 5% of those positions, 10% the next year, 15 the third year after that, and then on the fourth year, we reach our 20% contribution. So that'll be our maximum contribution for those 3 positions moving forward. But you will see those in the proposed budget in FY25, because we need to have that appropriation authority to fill those positions by the end of the year, which is our plan. For the emergency communication system update, we did open bids on that project on February 27th, and we're currently evaluating the bid alternatives. You may recall that one had both a VHF base bid and a 7,800 megahertz bid alternate. Both numbers were within the range of what we were expecting, so I think we do have a project we'll be able to advance. We're just currently assessing. They had some input into the design. They thought there were some potential cost savings options. We're meeting again on Wednesday of this week to talk through that and then make a decision about whether we go with the VHF or 7,800, but the council should see a contract for that project coming to the council in April. That'll be a project that'll probably last 12 to 18 months, so you will see that bridge fiscal year. So we'll see some expenditures in this FY24. We had $2.3 million budget for that project this year, but you'll see some of those expenditures carrying forward into next year as well. The city shop facility needs. The city has selected LCA architects for the design and the new shop facility. And so you should see a professional services agreement coming to you here within the next month, or maybe I'm hoping next committee cycle. And then we'll start with that process. They are trying to target getting the design and the project out to bid in July or August. Again, our goal is to get those funds obligated because the council did authorize the use of $3.6 million of ARPA funds towards that project, and we are required to get those funds obligated by the end of 2024 and expended by the end of 2026. So you'll see those expenditures for that project in the FY25 budget as we move forward. For employee recruitment and retention, we have made good strides filling many of our vacant positions. We still do struggle a little bit with our law enforcement positions and engineers specifically lately. We've had 2 engineers leave for private sector offers 30 to 40% more than we can afford to pay for those positions. So that will always, I think, will be a trend probably for the next, till the economy goes into a recession and you see that flow from the private back to the public sector time period. Yeah. So I don't see that happening too immediately. I think we're going to be into that position where we're probably going to be contracting more engineering services than we were hoping to do because of our inability. But our health insurance benefits, as we've discussed with the council in the past, we do continue to be well below our surrounding cities who generally cover 80% or more of dependent care. Last year, the council did approve increasing dependent care coverage from 50% to 55% last year. And if funding allows, I know the council made a commitment to try to continue that effort. We would like to propose increasing that to 60%. Again, we'll have to wait and see what our renewal is on health insurance. We'll have that information coming up in early April to see whether that is something that is attainable for us or not. The good news, inflation does continue to subside. So the CPI for 2023, the annual average is 4.1%, much better than the 8% for 2022. And so far for 2024, the 2 months are averaging just about 3.1%. So we are seeing that cooling. At this point, it's really too early in the budget process to determine what kind of cost of living we might be able to provide employees this year. We'll kind of work that through the budget process and see where that lands. But at least we are seeing that inflationary pressure subside a little bit, which is good to see. Roadway maintenance funding, again, the Bradbury case, that ultimately is going to end up in reduction of about 18% of our internal street fund revenues. That will require the general fund to provide even more support to the street fund to continue with roadway maintenance and repairs. So you will see that increased general fund contribution in the FY25 budget. For the downtown infrastructure reinvestment, the study concluded with a project with a cost estimate of about $26 million.
Chump change.
In our current position, we are going to need to reevaluate the project. We are going to probably need to focus on maybe some smaller scale targeted improvements that we can partner with the the Moscow Urban Rural Agency on. So we will probably go to micro projects compared to the grand $26 million project. So I don't expect you'll see anything identified for FY25, but understand we are continuing to look at some of the smaller scale improvements and looking at grant opportunities and seeing how we can leverage some of those with making some needed improvements for like electrical supply for the market and improved lighting with the current fixtures that are up in the trees and other kind of, tripping hazards and non-compliant ADA crosswalks and pedestrian ramps. So we're going to go for some smaller scale targeted improvements over time. Will have to be our strategy moving forward with some of our funding reductions. For urban forest management, again, that largely focused on hiring a city arborist to manage our community forestry program. That is not going to be achievable this year, but the Parks Department is working on a variety of other projects, including a downtown tree management plan. So we're continuing to do the best we can with the resources that we have available. For housing affordability, we have about 110,000 of the 150,000 ARPA funds that were dedicated to affordable housing development. We're continuing to work with our affordable housing development partners to see if we can get those funds committed by the end of the year. Again, those funds have the same restrictions. If we can't get them committed to a use by the end of 24 and expended by the end of 26, we may have to return those funds. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on to make sure that we get that obligated
110 is what we have.
correctly. Yeah.
Okay.
Bill, can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So does that money necessarily go to the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust, or can we use other agencies?
No, it's set up underneath the home ownership grant program, so other agencies can apply. So we've had Habitat and the trust apply both, and both receive allocations. It's just the housing construction has been relatively slow. So we haven't been able to get as many units constructed. We did have a meeting with Commissioner LaFortune about the proposal of a housing authority. And so that will be coming to the council coming up in May, the first meeting in May, to talk about that. And potentially, if we can't find a way to obligate that money, it could potentially maybe be some seed money for the authority to get it up and running. But that's certainly something we can consider later, Tim. But you'll see those funds carried over in FY25, hopefully that we get them committed by the end of the year. For community mobility improvements, we do have a number of largely grant-funded pedestrian and bicycle facility improvements that the council see in the FY25 budget. Those include the 2 Mountain View improvement projects, both North and South Mountain View, that were 2 TAP grants that the city received, as well as the South Main pedestrian underpass project. And we'll continue to work on other improvements and sidewalk improvements over time as well. For community beautification, again, with the reduction of street fundings, probably we'll put the majority of those projects on hold for a little while. Really, the only one we currently have planned was the South Couplet. That was just for the pathway that would be coming up on that on the east, or I should say, sorry, the west side of South Main as it passes underneath there, just south of South Couplet. We intended to do some kind of beautification, maybe historic signage and sections of the guardrail from the old bridge there, just to try to improve the aesthetics of that area, because that project did include the removal of the old bridge. And that requires some landscaping restoration work along the path there just to improve the aesthetics of the entry. So that's really the only project we currently have on the docket for FY25. So you will probably see funding for landscape architectural design in the FY25 budget for that project. Community playfield development, again, the recent Eddington edition now has provided access to the city's Police River Drive property that was initially acquired by the city for the development of athletic playfields. We have had the Joseph Field developed since that time. So while there still is some demand for plays, some of that was met by the Joseph project. We anticipate starting the master planning process on that project in FY27. So next year in 26, we'll be focusing on the Mosier Park. 27 would start on that facility. So we can start to get a long-term plan for the future development of that property and can start looking for grants and other funding sources to be able to make that happen. And then last time was supporting local economic development. We certainly continue to support and participate in a number of activities with CETA and the Chamber of Commerce Visitor Center, as well as the airport development and others. But you won't see any other significant expenditures in the FY25 budget underneath that category. So that's really just kind of that summary of really focusing on those high priority items. For those who haven't been in the development process, so we'll work, Sarah and I will be working with the departments to prepare the draft budget for the mayor's review and consideration. And then we'll sit down with a series of meetings with the mayor to review the budget and make any adjustments that the mayor would like to see made. around mid-June. Then we'll have the draft budget out and distributed to the council into the public and community for the community's review and the council's review in advance of the budget workshop, which has been scheduled for July 10th this year. So not my birthday. For the first time in 2 years. That's great.
Still have cake, Bill.
I know. So we'll do that Tuesday, July 10th. That'll start, probably be an 8:30 start. Usually wrap up early afternoon. So do plan that day. That will take the majority of the day going over the budget and reviewing it with the council. And then we have our budget hearing scheduled for August 5th. So after that, we will be done with another budget cycle. So just kind of want to focus on really what we're, where we're starting from this year as we develop the budget, focusing on those strategic priorities. And then if there's anything else that we should be considering as we develop the budget, I'd be happy to hear it from the council.
Will you have in your, I'm sure you will, because this is not a softball question quite like it seems. With the affordable housing dollars and kind of the protracted process therein, will you have some suggestions for the ways maybe we could, or places we could put that money if we can't put it in the housing? I mean, we'd have to come up with a way to dedicate it, right? By the end of
And there
this
certainly are. So I think we're
Obligated?
going to probably working with so the city shop would be the obvious project that we could allocate the money to.
Okay.
That would be, if we're out to bid in August, then by September, we're probably in that point of award. By that time, we'll need to have a commitment from our housing partners to understand whether they're going to be able to use that funding. If it looks like there may be some funding left remaining, then we come back to the council for authorization because that was dictated by the council of how the
Right.
monies would be allocated. So we'll make sure that we do find a use for the funds before the end of the calendar year.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So we can add another bay to the shop, for example.
It'll just supplement the general fund and not have to contribute as much.
Stop the flow of water is what
I
it
would-
will do.
So I like that we're all focusing on number 9 with the affordable housing, but I just want to make sure that I'm clear in understanding where we're at. The $110,000 where we currently need to allocate by next fiscal year, or are we sitting on that right now, or what's?
We're sitting on that right now. So the initial allocation was 150, 40,000 got allocated.
Okay.
So we have 110 remaining.
Okay.
That is uncommitted at this point in time. And so we need to get those funds obligated by the end of 24, expended by the end of 26. We need to have some reasonable assurance that there's going to be a beneficial use of those funds, or we'll need to look at reallocating those.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Other direction from council?
We do a lot with a little, so.
I appreciate the update. For sure.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to the workshop.
I'm having perspective moment. Do you remember how the end of 24 seemed like such a long time ago when we got that money? And it's just crazy to me. Anyway,
Goes quick.
yeah,
Time flies.
Okay, well, thank you for your time this evening.
thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, moving on to reports. Gina, would you like to?
I would love to. I would really love to. Okay, first, it was busy last couple of weeks. Fair and Affordable Housing Commission met, and it was a packed room. They have great attendance, but I think it's an interesting twist on attendance in that they don't do regularly monthly meetings. They wait until they've got something to meet about, which is kind of stinking cool. They're talking about the wellness fair coming up March 26th from 11 to 6. They had more volunteers than they needed. How's that for awesome? They're a very committed group. They think they're funny too, and so that's always fun to watch them make jokes, and then I don't get it, and they giggle. And anyway, they will be coming to council with their commission report on April 1st of this year, so it'll be some fun to look forward to. And they'll have another survey coming out. They're working on that soon. They are trying to kind of make sure that their questions are of value and bring back information to the commission. So I appreciate that. And they're going to review that starting in April. Then I went to my favorite, the Tree Commission. We had a kind of a abbreviated group. We had lots of people leaving early for spring break, which I don't blame them. But we had Olivia Wiebe. Am I getting that right, David? Wiebe, the sustainability manager. Can't say that fast 5 times, from the University of Idaho come in and kind of tell us about what their plans are and talk about ways that we as the tree commission and the city can kind of sustain, right? It was very cool. She got me really fired up about some of their efforts. And I think that she should come talk to us. It's just, she's so entertaining and so, everything is so enmeshed and I just loved it. Then we talked about Gormley Park, which I think is going to be my new favorite place to be. We, I believe that we had a benefactor. I'm not pointing any fingers, who might have enabled us to do the planting for Arbor Day this year in a far more impactful way. Remember I talked to you about golden raindrop crabapple trees the last time okay. Now we get to do those and ginkgos. And I'm telling you, I may just move in. I may just camp there all the time. It is really cool. And thank you to our benefactor.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it was our mayor. So, and we decided to be at the market May 4th and September 28th. So we're not really pushing ourselves this year, but it'll be fun to be there. Usually it's raining horizontally one of the days we're there. So I don't care which one it is, but I'm gonna choose the other one.
It's good for the trees.
It's good for trees, not humans trying to hold stuff down. Anyway, and I learned 2 new words when we were there at the tree commission. First one is paleoclimatology.
Okay.
So Nick, every once in a while, Nick Koenig, when he comes in, he'll throw those words out, right? The next one is dendrochronology. So we'll have a quiz next time, what these actually mean. I believe it's trees, right? Dating the age of trees. Is that
That's
tree rings
dendrochronology.
is dendrochronology. So anyway, pretty stinking cool. And I also had the distinct honor to get to do the dessert portion of the Latah Recovery Center's breakfast and dessert, or was it breakfast? Brunch and dessert or whatever. I got to MC the evening event. And aside from, the crying and hugging and having ice cream that always happens at their events, it really, every single time I walk away from one of their events, I'm reminded what a huge part of our community they are and what a huge impact they make. And I just completely enjoyed it. It was a little last minute. I got to had to try and stand in for Paul Kimmel, which is a hard thing to do. And he wrote some bad jokes, but other than that, it was a good evening.
Sandra.
The only 2 things I had going on, we had the Urban Renewal Agency, and the Cliff Notes version is we are back to square one and envisioning what we can do with that land. Once again, although I'm actually kind of excited about it, I hope we can come up with some new prospects. We had a lively discussion about next steps. I am actually looking forward to what those next steps might be and what they encompass. And then I was at the Breakfast Latah Recovery portion of that day, and yeah, it was always a big and impactful, and I'm grateful for the work that they do. And then I will just throw in there, for no other reason than to extend this meeting for Julia, that I had the great privilege to take a group of University of Idaho students to a service break to Hilo, Hawaii, and we got back at 3 a.m. this morning, and it was really great. We got to work in a wetland area that needed some work that was trying to be run by a cute little couple in Hilo, and we made great progress, and they want us to keep coming back. So it's been a busy and eventful couple weeks, even though my reports are small.
Very good. Julia.
Okay, I'm just gonna talk really slow. No. Well, the exciting news is that the Farmers Market Commission has put out for a vote the poster art. And so anybody who wants to vote on what poster you like the best for the Moscow Farmers Market, you can get on the city's website. Super easy to vote. There's like 5
I
or
voted.
6 options. Good.
Yeah.
Bryce voted.
Me too.
Oh, good. Well, everybody
Nice.
out there watching us, get on the city website and vote. There's some great local artists that have submitted some cool artwork. And then today I went to the Climate Action Working Group meeting, and they were doing very organized decision making. I was impressed. I brought their rubric, like a decision making rubric. It was really cool. And so that will help them set priorities in terms of what doable projects they want to tackle, because it's hard when there's so many options. And so very impressive group that's working really hard on climate action in their capacity as volunteers. And they are excited about Earth Day events coming up, and continuing to work with the city on what we can do for climate change, what we can do to combat climate change. So that was awesome. And that's all I have to report.
Drew, you're on.
Yeah, so Pathways Commission didn't meet this month. We handled everything in February, and since we didn't have anything to meet about, we pass that on, which I always appreciate. If you don't have a meeting to meet about, then we don't need to meet. That was good, but I am looking forward to it next month. And then Mura, Sandra already covered. Excited about the potential that we have to reconsider and revision what that means for the community. And Parks and Rec is coming end of this month. So that's all that I have. I'll make it short and sweet.
Wow. Bryce.
To follow in line with that, short and sweet, last week due to spring break and I'm sure some other things, planning and zoning was canceled, so we did not meet last week. Human Rights Commission meets tomorrow, so I will have a report for you 2 weeks from tonight about tomorrow's meeting. And then a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure you'll say more about this, Mr. Mayor, but I did attend the Moscow Pullman Airport Board meeting just as a spectator. So, and there's definitely, even with the new terminal opening sometime mid-May, there's a lot of things that are happening out there that I think as a community we should be excited about. And so I'm excited to be sitting in on those meetings and look forward to hearing more from the mayor. So that's what I got.
Yeah. So spring break was very quiet for everyone, I think, but I did get some news from the airport that $5.25 million was obtained from Washington by the efforts of Representative Mary Dye, who talked the Transportation Department, and that much money to offset the cost of the de-icer fluid retention system that was required by Washington. That's not part of usual requirements for airports. Usually they just let it run off, but Washington says, nope, you got to collect it. So the airport got recompense for that, which really helps finish up some of the other projects. One of which was an additional $3.5 million from the FAA to extend the apron and have provision for a fourth boarding gate at the airport. So things have expanded considerably. Finish date still May 15-ish because Tony Bean refuses to inflict beta testing on the general public when it comes to a new terminal. So he wants the thing to work first time out the gate. And I quite agree with that. Otherwise, the airport is moving on with its projections into looking at use of the land on the north side of the airport for rentals and things. What do we do with the old terminal, things like that, with an eye towards moving snow removal and the fire services to the south side of the runway. So anyway, lots of stuff going on there. And nothing else really too much happened. We did have the fun with the pavilion out at the East City Park that had to come down before it came down of its own accord. So we're looking at ways to get that replaced and reestablished as soon as we can get the plans drawn up, find the funding for it, and get it reestablished. So we're working on that. Thanks to Parks and Rec for all of the participation on that, and Cody and Community Services and building inspectors and the whole rest of the staff. So, Bill.
Just a couple quick updates. So you should have received a breakfast meeting invitation to restart the series. So the bi-monthly breakfast meeting, I think that recurring invitation ended in December. So there were only 2 people that attended in February. So
Was that with the university?
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the University City County School District bi-monthly breakfast meeting. So that'll be coming up on April 3rd. And that same night, I think, is the
Town and gown.
town gown with ASUI. as
Those
well.
emails got very confusing. Sorry. Sorry.
Yep. So that'll be both those events on that day. So those should be back on your calendar for the breakfast meetings moving forward.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Well, we have run clean out of agenda, so
I move we adjourn.
good idea. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you all.